And once again, I'm going to be preaching from the pulpit just until my feet get fully wet again when we get back into different times. So it's New Year's. It's New Year's Day, and Christmas is come and gone. And so have you all put your stuff away, your trees and everything? Some of you have. And some people haven't. In fact, I still have my lights up, and we're planning a big Epiphany celebration in my family. And big just means I cook. That will be on the 6th. And so for some people, we're still in Christmastide. And the church recognizes this. Now, one of the things that happens with Epiphany is that it gets sort of caught up in all of the busyness of the Christmas season and the New Year. And then if you're in the stores, I haven't been in the stores, but I imagine there are Valentine hearts already on the shelves. And so that's one of the things. But you may have noticed that I entitled my sermon, Stranger Things. And how many of you are familiar with the series on Netflix, Stranger Things, or have heard about it? It's been on Netflix. It's a series, and it's been on Netflix since 2016. And it's about a bunch of children, teens and preteens, and they're investigating a mystery. And it goes into sort of parallel universes and sort of putting yourself out there. And there is a place called the Upside Down. And so I was thinking about this story of the Magi and how these strangers are turning that world upside down and creating a parallel universe, almost going into a place that's so different from where they come from. And so that is why I call it Stranger Things. And I hope I didn't put any spoilers, but like I said, it's been around since 2016. So at least first season, if you're watching it, you probably have gotten through it. But we have this story from Matthew, and it gets smushed together with the birth narrative in Luke. And I was looking at some videos for the Funday School, and they have the shepherds looking up and seeing a star, and then the angels appear. And then they have the Magi at about the same time looking up and seeing a star, and then they start their journey. And this is all smashed together in one big story. And if we look at our nativity scenes are always showing the shepherds and the Magi. And you know, it kind of disturbs me sometimes because there's a lot of focus put on the Magi and their material wealth, and that they are royalty, and there's like, you can get camels when you do real elaborate ones. You can get camels and servants and caravans, and then there's usually like one shepherd tucked away in the corner. And the difficulty is that these stories are two different stories for two different communities. And so Luke is trying to make one point, Matthew is trying to make another point. And so I always separate them. Even when I do pageants, I try and separate them because you lose something when you smush them together. And like I said, the people with the gold and all the glitz sometimes take over the whole story. And so we don't want to do that. So let's talk about strangers. Who are these strangers? Okay, we hear three kings, that there are three kings, and that they come, and actually in some traditions, there are three kings from all the continents that were known at the time. So one was from Africa, one is from Europe, and one is from Asia. And you'll see that reflected, especially in Renaissance paintings. They try and cover all the continents. But you know, they're not kings, and many of you know that. And part of the mix-up comes from what we heard today in our scripture from Isaiah 60. Because Isaiah 60 said that the kings will come and that they will come to your bright light and that they will be bringing caravans of gold and frankincense. Like, wow, what an accurate prophecy. I mean, that would make it to the front of People magazine. Isaiah gets it right. Kings are coming with gold and frankincense. But that's not the point. Isaiah is talking to an exiled people, and he's talking about them returning. And not only you will return back to where you were, more people will come. Like I said, Isaiah 56 is one of my favorite passages because he says, my house is a house for all people. So Isaiah is setting up a world of inclusion, a full world, not where exiles return back to the same old thing, but where everybody is included, including other nations, kings, and they're all going to be bringing their gifts just as the exiles are bringing their gifts. So there was a mix-up there. And there's also a reason why we don't really rely on the King James Version in our tradition is because it was written for a king, and so it really has very kingly language in it. And so we want to make sure that we do not brand these people as kings. They are magi. And our term magician comes from the word magi. It's a Greek word. And these people are from, right now everybody characterizes them as Persians, that they're Persian scholars. They're not really quite Persian either. They come from the central Middle East, and they come from around the Caspian Sea. They actually have ties to Azerbaijan and the lands of the Kurds. And they were very in tune with nature. And so their beliefs really focused on signs and elements and being in touch with nature. And then when the Persians started rising up and becoming an empire, they actually turned to these people, because they were very educated, and brought them into the empire, and they were exposed to a religion called Zoroastrianism, which helped sort of form what they are. And Zoroastrianism is a very dualistic type faith tradition where there is a good God, and then there's a not so good God, and they're constantly in balance back and forth. That's interesting. Who else was taken in by the Persians? Do you remember the book of Daniel, the book of Esther? The Jews, when they were exiled. And they were taken into areas of trust and advisors with the king. And so you have these Medes, that's the term of the people they are, being taken in at the same time the Jews are, and they're given very high positions in the Persian Empire. Then the Persian Empire falls to the Greeks, and then, this is the interesting part, this new dynasty of the Hellenized Greeks take over Jerusalem again, and they take over the land of the Medes. And there is a king called Antiochus. And if you're familiar with Hanukkah, Antiochus is the king who is oppressing the Jews, and then they overthrow him and rededicate the temple. The Medes did the same thing at the same time, except they didn't have a temple, but they overthrew Antiochus. They were known as Parthians back then. And so the Parthians and the Jews have very similar backgrounds. And the Jews know very well about the Parthians and the Magi. And the Magi do not have a very good reputation with the Jews. They're seen as being very superstitious and sort of out of touch with what's really going on. So we have these parallel histories. And what happens is, talking about the world being turned upside down, we enter our story with what? All of Jerusalem terrified. King Herod terrified. Why? Because these high-level advisors from a rival empire that overthrew the previous king that you overthrew, Antiochus, are now coming into your country asking, where's the new king? We've seen his star. And the star is important because new kings, emperors, Caesar, all their births are heralded by celestial movements. And there's nothing King Herod can do if it has been ordained that he's going to be overthrown, and these foreigners who are rivals are now coming in asking, where's the king? And in our sort of understanding of it, we think, oh, well, they're just making a pit stop by Jerusalem to find the real king. But if you were trying to find out who the new king was going to be, you would go to the capital and you would go to the king. Maybe the king has a son that was born, or he knows of a general who had a son who was born. Someone in power. And it's funny because they go to the king and he is clueless. He doesn't even know the prophecy. He has to go to his advisors and find out what's going on. And so he sends them on their way. So what happens is they're probably looking for the son of a king, a general, an important person. They're sent to this little backwater in Bethlehem, a little sheep town. And they go there and they encounter a very average family in a very average place. And I think they are so moved by it that this is what God is showing them. This is what the heavens, this is what the whole earth is groaning for. And it's a little average child in a little backwater sheep town that's going to change the world through prophecy, through stars. And they fall down and worship and give gifts. Now, we don't know if there are three sages, three magi. The tradition comes from the three gifts. And the gifts are just representative. You know the hymn, We Three Kings. It's about, royal kingship, divinity, and then sacrifice. And so that's what the gifts represent. They're also very costly. And that is the part that I think Matthew is trying to tie back to Isaiah, saying that nations will come. Because Matthew is trying to make parallels with the Old Testament. He's trying to make connections specifically with Moses. And so that's where Herod comes in, because Herod is living in fear, and Herod is living an old way. He is living back when the Parthians overthrew a king. He's living in a place where violence gets the final word, and that's where power lies. The Magi see that it's not that way. It's about the people who are less, the people who are oppressed, a simple family being able to change the world without violence, without overthrowing. So, what is the good news in all of this? Well, I told you that Advent is about preparing, waiting, discerning. Then we came to Christmas. Christmas is about rejoicing. Now Epiphany is here. And for the next few weeks, we will be seeing God revealed in so many surprising ways. And the Magi set it up because they're looking for signs, and they're giving us an example to look for signs in our life. Look for those places where God is dwelling. The words of Isaiah 60 are so appropriate because it talks about people dwelling in darkness. And for the past 2 years, we feel like we have been dwelling in darkness. One thing after another, pandemics seems like it goes up and down, and when will it end? We have very harsh political rhetoric. We have violence. We have very harsh language. We have injustice and climate change. What do we do? We're the people dwelling in darkness. And it wouldn't be one of my sermons if I didn't get choked up. So we are people living in darkness. And what do we do? Isaiah from the start. Arise, shine, for your light is come. And that's not something that happened 2,000 years ago. It's something that we are called to do every day. Emmanuel, God with us. And God is with us if we recognize the places where God dwells. My favorite part of the Epiphany story is not about Magi and finding. It's about what happens at the end. Herod, in his fear and in his old-fashioned way of scarcity, causes much harm. If we know the rest of the story, atrocious behavior that ends in death, tears, and injustice. But that isn't where God is dwelling. God is dwelling in a place of change, a place of movement, a place of action. So the Magi are changed and go a different way. And I hear that call for all of us to go a different way. Don't go the way of King Herod. You go a different way. It's so easy for us to follow the same roads. And going through the same resolutions every year. Try a different way. Look a different way. I'm sure the Magi had plans. And they said, we're going to stock up and go this direction, and the people are waiting, and we have these towns laid out. They changed their plans. They were resilient. They rose, and they lived in the light. They moved. And that is what we are called to do, is we are called to be a people of movement and change, to wake up. To wake up and put our face in the sunshine, just like Isaiah says. So I admire the adventurous Parthian scholars because they sort of put themselves out there, ended up in Jerusalem, encountered suspicion and fear, but they persevered until they finally found Emmanuel. So, my friends, as we move into 2022, I pray we continue to move forward in solidarity and love and to find new ways to go. My prayer is that you may be surprised as you find God in all those unexpected places. And I pray that we all find Emmanuel in our travels, because if you're familiar with the Messiah and the old-fashioned King James words, "Arise, shine, for thy light is come, and the glory of God is risen upon thee." And let this be not only for Epiphany, but as you journey through 2022 and throughout the rest of your life. Because it's not about being a star, it's about living in the light and going new ways. Amen.